So we're getting into plants, but we've already talked a bit about plants. Now we're getting into advanced plants. We're getting into like the stuff that separates high school from college. Talking about vascularity, specifics on the structure of the xylem and phloem. We're going to talk about reproductive processes. We're going to talk about how monocots and dicots are specifically different, not just in their, I don't know, count the number of leaves, but a little bit more depth. So today we're focusing on what are known as the spermatophytes. Spermatophytes are all plants that produce seeds across the boards. Land plants, as we talked about last time, are embryophytes. A type of embryophyte is the spermatophyte. Spermatophytes are divided up into two major groups, the angiosperms and the gymnosperms. So angiosperms are flowering fruit plants. Gymnosperms have exposed seeds. That's really the big difference in these two large, broad categories. So here we've got the sort of a diagram of the bracts of a gymnosperm. You can see this is a woody female cone. When you look at a cone, you'll notice that they open up. I assume it's fall right now. If you're listening to this later, I don't know when it'll be, but it's fall right now. You probably go out. One of my favorite things to do when I'm walking, and I don't know why, I just like the way it sounds, is stepping on pine cones. I just like the crunch. Those pine cones are open. If you were to pull the pine cones apart, or if you've ever seen a squirrel pull a pine cone apart, you'll notice that there are seeds that are completely exposed at the base of each of those bracts. So those are open seeds. They're not encased in any fruit. Gymnosperms have a really, really long history. They were at their peak during the Mesozoic. I know everybody's seen like Jurassic Park and things. You imagine these big jungles with dinosaurs in them, but that's not the way the Mesozoic worked. The Mesozoic was filled with pine cones, conifer trees. Imagine like an apatosaur wandering through a pine cone forest. That's way more likely. So we have a lot of representation in the fossil record of gymnosperms. They've been around for about 300 million years. Plants got woody, as we talked about when we talked about sort of the beginning of life. And then after they established that wood, you start to get this differentiation in different types of trees, one of which is the conifer. Yes?
So not all gymnosperms are conifers.
That is correct. Yes. Typically, I talk a lot about conifers because I think they're the ones you relate to most, the gymnosperms you see most often. Typically, a conifer will have two types of cones, pollen cones and ovule cones, boy cones and girl cones. The larger cones toward the center of the tree are typically female cones. They contain the eggs. The male cones are farther out on the edge of the tree. They typically contain pollen. It's not like these are baby pine cones. They're the male cone. So they're sitting there producing a whole bunch of sperm that'll get collected in the wind, blow across the female, and then you can fertilize the eggs, thus making seeds. Now, conifers are super cool because of that unique shape they've got. If you look at a conifer, I'm sure when you were younger, you probably have all drawn conifer trees, like Christmas trees and stuff. It's a triangle with a little, rectangle at the base, right? It's the easiest thing for anybody to draw. That triangle shape is there for a reason. In cold weather, which is where the conifer is dominant, it sheds snow easily. So as precipitation falls on it, it doesn't gather up all that precipitation and break. One thing you'll notice around here is when it ices, you'll get lots of limbs breaking off of trees. Conifers typically have their limbs minimized in this conical shape in order to shed snow. They also have, instead of wide leaves, they have what's called a scale. It's a very, very thin needle. That thin needle, if you were to take a scalpel and slice that needle, you can unroll it because that needle is really just a tightly rolled up leaf. It's tightly rolled up because, as far as cold goes, it's got a tiny bit of air on the inside, and that air acts as an insulator. It keeps it warm. So during the coldest months of the year, it can keep its cellular machinery warm enough to continue to do photosynthesis. That's why these particular types of leaves, these scales, stay green all year long. They're going to constantly undergo photosynthesis because they're adapted to these cold weather. Now, that doesn't mean that the leaves live all year long. Just like other leaves, they've got about a year-long lifespan. They constantly are falling, but it's a regular rate of falling and replacement. It's not like some of the oak trees and things. They just drop all their leaves at once. If you've ever had like a Christmas tree in your house, a live one, which I haven't done in a long, long time because I'm cheap, you'll notice that there's scales all over the ground of the tree. It's constantly shedding them. It's not your fault. It would have done that in the wild too. If you ever look in your yard at the base of a conifer tree, there's usually a whole bunch of scales, a whole bunch of these leaves on the ground. They're just going to keep building up. So these are how conifers are adapted to the cold. They've got that triangle shape in order to shed snow. They've got scales that are smaller, so they have a reduced surface area. They don't cool down as much, and they've trapped some air. And they've got leaves, the scales, that remain green year-round. The other type of plant that we're going to look at, the spermatophyte that we're looking at, is the angiosperm. Now, angiosperms have highly complex reproductive systems, sort of characterized by the flower. Angiosperms produce flowers and fruit-covered seeds. The flower of the angiosperm is perfectly adapted to attract pollinators. There's this cool relationship between pollinators and flowers that's developed over millions and millions of years. It's kind of become essential to both of their lives. So if one of them was to disappear, like, I don't know, the bee, this would lead to a major impact on plant species because they're no longer able to complete their life cycle. Pollination occurs, as we talked about last time, when pollen binds to the stigma. So this is the female component of the plant, the pistil. The whole thing's the pistil. The pollen binds to the stigma. It will release two sperm cells that will then swim down the style and then fertilize the egg that's in the ovary. That will create a diploid zygote. So that shouldn't look too different than any other type of plant. Where the difference comes in is after you've created a zygote, you begin to ship sugar to the ovary. You fill it up with sugar. So now we've got this embryo, this zygote, that's starting to develop. It begins to rapidly divide, and some of it divides more rapidly than others. It's an uneven mitotic division. That leads to different areas being created, one of which is this thing here called a cotyledon. The cotyledon is filled with fats and material that the young embryo, this component right here, will use to grow. So we're building a seed here. So rapid mitosis, you get this fat-filled, fat and some sugar-filled cotyledon surrounding an embryo. The embryo will draw nutrients off that cotyledon in order to grow. Few quick notes about the structure of the seed. The outside of the seed is called a seed coat. That's going to protect the seed. We're getting more into that in a second. Of course, we have a cotyledon. We also have the developing embryo that's got an epicotyl or an early primordial leaf, hypocotyl, and then, of course, what's here, this is called the root radicle. That radicle is going to emerge first. That seed coat allows the seed itself to survive during tough times. Well, for instance, corn. You've eaten corn before, right? Yeah, I assume. After you've eaten corn, you notice corn in your feces like the next day. It survives the rough environment, which is your digestive system. Your digestive system is fully designed to break food down, yet the seed makes it through. You'll notice that in a bunch of organisms, seeds tend to survive digestive systems because of that seed coat. The seed also prevents the seed coat also prevents the seed from drying out. It has a waxy outer layer. Some seeds have been able to survive fires. In fact, some seeds need fire in order to germinate. Other seeds, heck, we found seeds from in glaciers from 40, 50,000 years ago that we've germinated, that we've grown. And it's always a great idea to take ancient organisms of whom we have no idea how they interact with the environment and grow them. There's nothing that could possibly ever go wrong with that. So we can do it. When conditions are perfect, just right, and that seed's constantly checking conditions around it, it will first, not secrete, it will first release the root radical. That root radical will grow and begin to take in nutrients from the environment. I want to correct some misunderstandings people have about seeds. I hope they were corrected for you in Bio 101. Where do baby plants, these seeds, get energy from?
In the plant.
Right, in the plant. They're not getting it from the sun. Why are they not getting it from the sun? Because there's no leaves yet, and it's under freaking ground. So the plant needs to put out this root radical. It's using up all of these nutrients, aerobic cellular respiration from that cotyledon. It begins drawing in nutrients and using that stored up energy in order to grow a stem and eventually put out leaves. Once those true leaves are out, you can have photosynthesis going on, and the plant takes on that fully autotrophic nature. So what you get from a seed is a seedling. Sometimes you need to really pull them out of the ground. I know that I've had several acorns take root in my garden, and it requires a lot of pulling. So as early on we were building that seed, we have to surround the seed in an angiosperm with a fruit. Fruit structures contain the seeds, and they help in seed distribution. There are lots and lots of different types of fruits, lots of different types of seeds. I tend to think of fruits as ovaries that are filled with sugar. That's all they are. Sugar-filled ovaries, which is the best candy name you'll ever come up with. That's what fruit is. You're taking sugar, you're pumping it into the around the ovary in order to make it more delectable, so that other organisms will eat it and carry it around. So far, so good. You guys all right? So plants, as they go from a seedling, need to continue to grow. And you've got two big, broad types of growth: vegetative growth and reproductive growth. Vegetative growth is where you're increasing the size of your root and your shoot system. Your roots are getting longer and deeper into the ground. Your shoots are coming out of the ground, getting taller and taller and taller. Anything that is not the growth of the reproductive system is termed vegetative. Vegetative growth is sort of managed by what's called the vascular cambium. This gives rise to your primary vascular tissues. Oh, you guys know this. All right, you got two types of vascular tissues. What are they? Carlos. Right. And what does the xylem do? I know, right? Savannah knows, though. Yeah, you do, because this was the exact question I asked you last time.
Was it nutrients?
That's right. That's the phloem transports nutrients, and the xylem transports water and provides structure. Some plants have what's known as indeterminate growth. That is, the growth doesn't have any end. It will keep growing and growing and growing as long as nutrients are present. That is not the case for you and I. Yes?
Did we say that vegetative growth was for the root system or like the vascular system?
The roots and the shoots are going to also have your vascular system in it.
Okay.
So, yeah, vegetative is anything that is not reproductive. So you guys, you don't have indeterminate growth. You have what's known as determinate growth. Some plants and animals like us have a limit genetically on how tall we can grow. You, if you kept eating and eating and eating, might grow out, but you won't grow up. Does that make sense? Anymore. Sorry, some of you are like disappointed by that, but most of you are done growing. This is it. You've peaked. There are trees, though, redwood trees, for instance, that will keep growing and growing and growing until quite literally you end up dealing with basically forces of gravity that are what actually hold you down. Mosses can't grow very tall. Why can't moss grow tall? What do they lack? Right, they lack a vascular system, so they've got to remain close to where the water is. They have to absorb it through osmosis. They can't send it up. And this is what we covered in lab last time. You have two big classifications of angiosperms. You could be monocots or monocotyledonous or dicotyledonous. You might hear this as monocots and eudicots. Eu just means good. So monocots have a single cotyledon. Dicots have two cotyledons. Monocots have narrow leaf veins, parallel leaf veins. Dicots have very broad, net-like leaf veins. In monocots, the vascular bundles are scattered. In dicots, they're in a ring. And then in monocots, you have floral parts in multiples of 3. So 3, 6, 9, 10. Not 10. 3, 6, 9, 12. And in dicots, floral parts are in multiples of 4 or 5. Don't ask me how to figure them out if they're in 15, because that's both 3 and 5. The way I would do it then is the way I do most of these plants, which is I really just freaking look at the leaves. Questions or concerns? That's that. Angiosperms versus gymnosperms. Monocots versus